27 to September 23rd, 2016, representing the constituency of Calgary Southeast and later Calgary Midnapore. Throughout his service in Parliament, he held several executive portfolios, including Minister of Defense, of National Defense, Minister of Multiculturalism, and Minister of Employment and Social Development. Please join me in welcoming Premier Jason Kenney.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody from Alberta's municipal leadership. Welcome to Calgary, which has been determined by The Economist to have the highest quality of life in the Western Hemisphere and the third highest in the world. Right, Mayor Gondek? A great example of Alberta's quality of life. Thank you all for your welcome and for welcoming ministers of the government throughout your deliberations. And thanks, as always, to you for your own public service to Albertans from summer villages to our big cities of over 1 million people. Folks, I've got 50 minutes and I'm looking forward to taking questions from your president. And by the way, I see some deputy ministers and ministers here. Thanks to them as well for their public service. When I first stood in front of you over 3 years ago, Alberta was in a tough way. We had been through 5 years of economic decline and stagnation. We had experienced a jobs crisis with longer-term unemployment than at any time in our modern economic history. We had gone through 9 years of multi-billion-dollar deficits, adding nearly $90 billion to the provincial debt. And we had seen a massive outflow of investment from our province, all of which meant your tax bases were struggling, in some cases shrinking. And Alberta was losing people. More people were leaving the province than coming to it. Unusual for the modern history of this province. And so the message I brought 3.5 years ago was one of challenge and change. We had to make difficult decisions, all of us, to get this province and its economy back on track. But I'm pleased to report to you that thanks to the hard work and the perseverance of Albertans, thanks to never giving up on this province or its entrepreneurial culture, that Alberta is back and back in a big way, leading Canada in economic growth, leading Canada in job growth. $150 billion of new investment that's come back to this province in the past 2 years alone. Leading Canada now in population growth. Leading Canada in interprovincial migration. And leading Alberta's own modern economic history in diversification. Now, I know many will rack up the great economic news to the recovery in commodity prices. But by the way, as we can see, oil prices are now down 1/3 over the past 6 weeks. So we continue to ride the roller coaster. We all know that. It's hardly news to us as Albertans. But here's the exciting thing. The vast majority of the job growth in new investment and economic expansion that we've been experiencing comes outside of the primary oil and gas sector. I am, and I hope you all are, proud that Alberta is the 4th largest producer of oil in the world, and one of the largest producers of natural gas. And I think we can see now clearly with what's happening in Europe and global energy markets that the world more desperately needs our responsibly produced democratic energy more than ever. And we have a calling. We have a calling as a country. We have a purpose as a province to deliver more of that energy to global markets. The government that I am proud to lead, which was elected with over 1 million votes 3.5 years ago, was committed to securing jobs, the economy, growth in the economy, and getting pipelines built. Well, I'm happy to tell you that we're now exporting more Alberta energy than ever before. We're on track for the completion of the Trans Mountain expansion by the beginning of 2024. The Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada projects, we're shipping more by rail than ever before. And I believe that the world is now knocking at our door. That's the message I hear in Washington, D.C., where I've been 3 times in the past 6 months, offering Alberta as a solution to the continental and international energy crisis. It's not just about Vladimir Putin's obscene invasion of Ukraine. But there is a growing global scarcity of energy. It's true that the world will be going through an energy transition in the decades to come. But it's also true the world understands that there is no foreseeable or immediate substitute for the kind of energy that we produce. And so there is a huge future for that industry and a great need and a responsibility for us to develop it. But here's the truth. We have seen exciting diversification right across the spectrum of our economy. Last year was the best year in the history of Alberta agriculture. This year is set to exceed it in terms of the best farm revenues in history. $1.5 billion of new investment in agri-food projects and value-added and food processing that we've seen announced since 2019. Thousands of new jobs in that sector, from Lethbridge to Edmonton and everywhere in between. Last year and this year were the best 2 years in the history of Alberta's forestry industry. Canfor, Canada's biggest forestry company, shut 3 mills in BC, purchased 3 in Alberta, with hundreds of millions of investment from them and other companies in new technology, new mills, and new jobs across Alberta. We are living through a boom in our IT and digital sectors, in the broader innovation economy, but particularly in information technology. Edmonton has the fastest growing high-tech sector anywhere in North America right now, and we've seen massive investments from global companies for like Infosys and Emphasis, Amazon Web Services, choosing Alberta for the single largest capital investment in the history of Canadian high tech, the $4.3 billion construction of their massive Western North American data processing center. RBC and Rogers and so many more making announcements collectively for thousands of high-tech jobs. And meanwhile, that great Alberta entrepreneurial culture demonstrated in the huge expansion of the startup sector and in venture capital. We keep knocking the lights out and breaking new records of investment in that venture capital, which is the jet fuel of the innovation economy. Film and television. We've gone from $100 million a year in productions to nearly $1 billion a year in productions. And as I've mentioned to you before, that includes the single largest film production in Canadian history, the HBO zombie movie, The Last of Us. Fill in your jokes right there. I don't know, they still won't let me on. I've been trying to get a walk on. But as they say, I guess I'm proof that politics really is showbiz for ugly people. But none of you resemble that. And so much other exciting stuff that's happening here. I can tell you just 2 days ago, I had the pleasure of making a game-changing announcement of a project that we've been working on for over 2 years with de Havilland. Now, because we've been doing well on manufacturing, but it hasn't been keeping up to the growth in all of these other sectors. And much of the manufacturing that we have is connected to the energy sector, implements for the oil sands, et cetera. But we defined in Alberta's recovery plan at the bottom of the COVID trough in June of 2020 that aviation should be a key industry for future growth. And I'll be honest with you, I was a bit skeptical about that. You don't think about, you imagine Montreal, Toronto, as big aviation industries. It seemed like a bit of a stretch, but we decided there were lots of natural advantages in the province for that sector. And we went after it big time. And this week we scored one of the most important new investments in Alberta's recent economic history, a $1 billion plus investment to create an aeronautics and aviation campus at de Havilland Field, east of Calgary in Wheatland County, that will create at least 1,500 high-paying, long-term manufacturing jobs. It's a big deal. With all sorts of spin-off. And there is more to come. I'm not downing tools. Folks, in fact, some of you may have seen that I took the initiative to join the famous queue in London to pay respects to Her late Majesty. As they were saying in the United, thank you, and to Her Majesty for her service. The Brits love queuing. Why did the Englishmen go to the back of the queue? To stand in line, right? So it was a remarkable experience. And while I was in that queue at 10 o'clock at night on Friday, while a cold wind was blowing off the Thames River, I was doing a 2-hour conference call with a bunch of our ministers and deputy ministers on another major aviation project, which I hope that we're going to land in the next couple of weeks. So much exciting news yet to come. And on top of all of that, we are on the cusp of what you might even call a new industrial revolution in this province that marries our abundant natural resources with our spirit of innovation in this field of green technology to produce products that the world needs. We set out in our natural gas vision and our petrochemical and hydrogen strategies to attract $30 billion of new capital investment in the petchem space. And so far, we've secured $18 billion of publicly announced investments. We're hot on the trail of another $12 billion, including the world's first net zero ethane cracker, the $12 billion plus Dow project. These are huge industrial projects that will spin off thousands of jobs for years to come, that will take our natural gas feedstock, which is available very affordably in Alberta, add the technology, the human capital that we have in this province for products for export around the world. The same is true for hydrogen. I really believe that we are set to become a key global hub in the multi-trillion-dollar hydrogen industry. We have the best geology for carbon sequestration, and there alone, we're looking to about at least $30 billion of capital investment in carbon capture, utilization, and storage infrastructure in the balance of this decade. I think we're on the cusp of we've attracted $12 billion in the hydrogen space, and I think we'll hit our target of $30 billion. So if you take the realistic goals and the investments that have been announced in petrochemicals, in hydrogen, and in CCUS, and they're all combined because to have low-emitting petchems and low-emitting hydrogen, they need the CCUS. The oil sands need the CCUS to reduce their emissions and attract capital in the future. All of this together means long-term employment for upstream exploration production, for blue-collar folks working on the rigs, for pipeliners, for rural service contractors, oil field service workers. All of that together, you're looking at something in the range of $90 billion of capital investment in this province over the next decade alone. This is huge. And none of this, I would argue, is happening by accident. Of course, we have our natural advantages. We have inherited, I think, the strong policy choices of previous governments, none of which are perfect, but it's not by accident that we have the youngest population in Canada, that we've had through most of our history, the fastest growing population in Canada. It's not by accident that we have the highest incidence of STEM disciplines in our labor force. It's not by accident that we had the competitive tax rates. But we realized in 2019 that we had to put the pedal to the metal after 5 years of economic stagnation and decline. And that's why we reduced the business tax rate by 1/3 to lead Canada and North America in business competitiveness. It's why we set out to cut the red tape burden by 1/3. And we've gone from an F to an A, from 10th place to 2nd place in the country in just 3 years in terms of the red tape burden, according to the CFIB. It's why we created the legislation for designated industrial zones. And I want to thank the Industrial Heartland Association and its municipalities for having proposed that. It's one-stop shopping, accelerated approvals for business, because we are competing. I can tell you, when I sat down in 2019 with companies like Dow and Mubdala, major global multinationals, $100 billion plus companies, to promote these investments here, I can tell you, we aren't owed anything. We don't win these competitions just by being nice guys. We have to compete. We have to compete with Texas and Louisiana. We have to compete with Southeast Asia. We have to compete with jurisdictions that don't think they are owed investment just because they're Boy Scouts. They're very serious about the competitive advantage. We had to meet and beat all of those jurisdictions to start winning some of these new investments. And the job creation tax cut, red tape reduction, designated industrial zones, the local property tax breaks. I know that many of you were opposed to that at the time. It was an idea that came from the industrial heartland, but it has worked. And if you don't believe me, talk to Reeve Amber Link out at Wheatland County. She's got a population of 9,000 in the county. And in the past 6 months alone, over 2,000 new jobs have been announced for that county because of an aggressive use of those targeted tax incentives. Additional incentives that we've created for diversification, like the expanded and improved Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, like the expanded and improved film and television tax credit, like critical investments in infrastructure. That includes broadband, by the way. We are determined to get to 99% reliable high-speed internet coverage across the province, in part because we want to ensure that every community in Alberta can benefit from the digital economy of the future. And just today, we're announcing another $70 million as part of our $900 million strategy between Alberta's government, the federal government, and the private sector to get us to 99% high-speed internet over the next 4 years. That's very important. We've also made critical investments in expanding and training up our labor force, retooling the way we finance post-secondary education, to incentivize our post-secondary institutions, to work with the private sector, to create more seats for in-demand occupations, and to focus on experiential learning, on co-op programs, on apprenticeship programs, and to valorize the skilled trades. Because, as I always say, we believe in Alberta that a trade certificate has at least as much value, merit, and worth as a university degree. All of these things together. But, Amber, I know you're going to cut me off in a moment. Let me just say, we're not without challenges for all of this good news. And it is great news. It's thanks in part to this growth. Yes, commodity prices help. That Alberta's been able to get the first balanced budget in 14 years, that our credit rating has been upgraded rather than downgraded as it had been for 10 years. It's because of this that our population is once again growing. But the biggest challenge that our economy will face in the foreseeable future is not enough people and not the right skills for the jobs of the future. And we all need to work on that. And that's why we launched the Alberta is Calling campaign. To send a message to our fellow Canadians that if they want to achieve the dream of home ownership, if they want a great quality of life to be able to raise a family, that Alberta is calling. I was just in Toronto this week. We rented out entire TTC subway stations and wrapped them with Alberta swag, explaining that if people want an affordable house, and one of the things says, this is in Vancouver as well, come to Alberta to see something you've never seen before, an affordable detached home. It's true. Toronto, Vancouver, 1.2 million. Calgary, Edmonton, around 400K. More affordable housing in our secondary cities, our mid-sized cities, I should say. Whoops, that was a faux pas. Our mid-sized cities, our great mid-sized cities, and our rural communities. Friends, I'm optimistic about that. I truly am. Because, one of the reasons we attracted that de Havilland Project and others, they said to us, we're concerned about availability of labor. So we said, okay, then you're going to have to locate in Alberta. Because how could you possibly go to the GTA or the GVR where people cannot afford to live? Newcomers arriving in this country, they cannot afford a house in those areas. They can afford the dream of at least starting out an apartment and then eventual home ownership here with the lowest taxes, the highest incomes, the strongest economy. I believe we are set for a sustained Alberta boom between natural population growth, net interprovincial migration probably in the range of 20 to 40,000 a year, natural population growth of around 20, 25,000 a year, plus knocking the lights out by getting more than our share of international immigration. I think we're looking for the next several years at growing our population to between 80 and 110,000 new Albertans every year. That itself will pose challenges, but good challenges. So friends, we Albertans, I'll just close with this. At the bottom of the COVID crisis, when we'd been unable to sell an Alberta government bond for nearly 2 months, we were looking at having to liquidate assets and potentially, God forbid, default on debt in the spring, summer of 2020, when oil prices had gone from $70 to minus $40. when we didn't know how long this crisis was going to last. Was it going to be like the 1930s all over again? And at the bottom of that crisis, I was literally dialing for dollars with major bankers trying to help move our bonds. And I got on the phone a guy named Louis Vachon, the president of the La Banque Nationale in Montreal. And he said, Premier, I know it looks pretty bleak for you Albertans right now, but let me tell you, sorry, Justin, I'll call back later. I said, I got nothing left to lose. I said, Justin, Louis, yeah, it is looking pretty bleak out here. And Monsieur Vachon said to me, you know, Premier, I just want you to know, you Albertans are going to get through this better and faster and stronger than anywhere else. And I just thought he was giving me some happy talk. I said, why do you say that, Monsieur Vachon? He said, listen, I'm 69. I've worked all across the world, all across Canada. And I have observed something about Alberta that is truly unique, that I haven't seen anywhere else in the world. And it's your greatest asset. I thought, was he talking about natural resources? I said, what's that? He said, your greatest asset is the entrepreneurial culture of your people. It's irreplaceable. It is remarkable. He said the spirit of innovation and the entrepreneurial risk-taking culture of Alberta is your greatest asset, and that's what's going to get you through this. And he was absolutely right. So folks, let's celebrate this great province and its magnificent future. Thank you for your service and leadership. God bless. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, Peter, this is clearly not a UCP caucus meeting. Too soon?
Stop doing that. Thank you, Premier, for being
By the way, Peter, I'm not normally this much taller than you. They gave me a stool here. Is this for Kathy? Sorry. All right.
Thank you, Premier, for being with us here today. And thank you for detailing an exciting, adventurous future for Alberta and Albertans. We do have still a few minutes. I didn't think you wanted it, but we do have a few minutes for some questions and answers, so I'll get right into it. So, what can municipalities do better going forward to better advocate to the provincial government?
I really think, and most of you do this, solutions. We all know, come on. I mean, we do it with the feds, you do it with us, let's be honest. The opposition does it because it's easy, but you're complaining, yeah, cheap and easy. Solutions, hard. Making hard choices. You all know that. That's the hard part of government. And I think we have in our politics today, I'm not casting a direction in any particular person, but we have this tendency to reduce politics to hashtags and slogans and to go for the quick and easy headline. As Rod Love, the late Rod Love, Ralph Klein's former chief of staff, used to say, that political journalists are basically fight promoters. And we all know that. So heat attracts more coverage than boring, practical, difficult, pragmatic solutions. My advice is, like, when I sit down with mayors or other stakeholders, if they come to me with an understanding that you know, we have limited resources, we can't do everything, we can't satisfy all of your needs and wants, that for almost every policy option there's some unintended negative consequence. What are the least bad choices? What are the realistic options? That is, I'll tell you, that gets my attention. and I think that's true of anybody in leadership, if people come to you with practical, well thought out, even incremental solutions, we can't boil the ocean, and we need to work to find practical, workable, affordable solutions to the very real public policy challenges that we face. And I've generally found that to be the case in working with you. I know that there have been frustrations with our government, but I think most of you also understand that we had to get our finances in order. I mean, folks, just a reminder here, we all go to bed at night as elected people with visions of dollar signs and $10, $15 billion surpluses dancing in our head, but we can't count on them, right? I mean, 2 months ago, we were at $120 WTI. If that had been annualized, we'd be looking at a $20 billion plus surplus there. But all of a sudden, where are we at right now? WTI, as I speak, is $78.53. It's down $4 since I woke up this morning. So that's down $40, which on an annualized basis is an annualized basis, believe it or not, that's a $20 billion fiscal differential for Alberta.
That's huge.
So my point is, don't look at the big, don't imagine that we can wish our way out of fiscal constraints. So any government, any provincial government is going to have limits. You have limits in the tolerance of your taxpayers for tax rates. Let's work within that, realistically, come with solutions, and I think any reasonable government will listen to those.
Well, that's an excellent segue to my next question, and I fully realize this isn't a UCP convention, but do you have any advice for your successor on how to build strong, positive relationships between the province and municipalities?
Well, I think listening is always key, and I appreciate that at these conventions, we always have a large contingent of ministers, and they hang around, they go to the hospitality suites. It's often the informal discussions that matter most. I regret, one of the many things that we lost in COVID was just the ability of interacting personally. So we lost a lot of that. That relational equity that's so important, that's not an excuse, but in the post-COVID period, I think it'll be easier for ministers, my successor, and others to get around the province. I'll just put in a plug for a future government, because again, I got nothing to lose. They should probably go back and buy a couple of Alberta government airplanes so we can get up north and get around the province much more easily. Because it's not good that we're stuck in drive time of the capital or whatever. So my advice to anybody succeeding me or ministers is get out, look on the ground. Seeing is believing. Just yesterday, I was out in the Kenney First Nation. We had our annual protocol meeting with the Blackfoot Confederacy, and they have some environmental challenges with the irrigation infrastructure and the dams down there, which I've been reading about in briefing notes for the past 3 years. But they wanted to take me out to actually see what the issues are, and it changes everything when you get a chance to be on the ground. So, and finally, I would just say, look, I understand how this works. It's easy in it's tempting perhaps in municipal government to project problems upwards. Again, we do that, I think, often quite legitimately with respect to the Government of Canada. But I try to always keep some space. Let's be grown-ups here. I mean, there's every political view in the province is represented in this room, right? We have probably lifetime NDP voters here and people who think I'm a pinko in this room. Apparently I am now. Who knew? So you got the whole spectrum of political views, but one of the blessings of municipal government is you guys are officially nonpartisan. I think that's a great opportunity to leverage that. Like Amarjeet and I, we're members of different federal parties. We were served in Parliament across the aisle from one another, But Amarjeet, we haven't agreed on everything, but I think we've had a constructive and respectful relationship, finding common ground and solutions. I think it's possible.
Well, that's all the questions that we have. I must say thank you again, Premier, for being here with us today and for your amazing service to this province. With that, we're going to take one final short coffee break to reset the stage, and we will be back at 11 a.m. sharp. Can we have a huge applause for me?
Thank you very much.